colors fade to black, and the thought of the wasted dreams of a nation down on its knees. Is it already over? Is it already over? Get your tickets to the circus show. If you don't, then you'll never know. Take a stand while you have the time. Drown your fear and keep hope alive. Be the change that you want to see. Be the wrench inside the machine. Is it already over? Is it already over? I don't think it's over. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Small Town Underground, special Wednesday night show. Thank y'all for being here. Please help share the show. I hope you guys enjoyed the most recent video that I did with the Georgia gun owners and the SCB update with Holly Kessler. I started kind of a new format where we're going to be getting some of these smaller segments where we can't do lives, and then I'm putting a lot of information in the video. So, you know, just shoot me a message and tell me whether you like that or not. I feel like that we're providing a lot of education in with the videos, and we're actually backing up the guests that we bring on. And so had a lot of fun. We've got some more coming. We'll have Mallory Staples on this weekend for a weekend update with the Freedom Caucus, and many, many more coming. So I've been looking forward to this show. And before I get started and introduce our guest, I just want to tell you guys this is a candidate for lieutenant governor, and we are a live show, and we are going to be reading all the questions I come across in the comments. And so I asked people to be respectful and keep the dialogue going. This is absolutely fabulous that we are to the point where we're having good conversation with people who could possibly be running the state in the future. And I think this is what we want and what we need. And I'm grateful for this to be happening. So our first candidate tonight for lieutenant governor is Greg Dolezal, who is here with me. You guys know he came into the show a couple weeks ago, and he's been talking with us. And if you've seen his social media, he's been sharing a lot of stuff about taxes. He's currently in the Georgia Senate. And right now we're in the middle of a legislative session. And so there's a lot of moving parts going, and I want to kind of just start and have Greg give us the update on it, and then we're going to get into his candidacy. So I appreciate you coming on tonight with us, Greg. And how are you feeling, sir?
I'm feeling good, man. It's past my bedtime, Roy, but for you, I will stay up late. I usually get up at 5:30 to get down to the Capitol before traffic gets too bad from Forsyth County. And it's been a crazy day, man. I mean, we had data center tax bill in the finance committee today. We had the Fulton County FBI situation happening.
Yes.
I was just a wild, full day. So yeah. I'm looking forward to chopping it up with you for a little bit.
Absolutely, man. I'm going to tell you, everybody knows I work 2 jobs, got a family. And so this off day, we had plans where it was just like we were out there on the streets all day long, and I didn't get a lot to on my phone time looking around. And boy, when I got here and realized what was going on. So first off, can you give us do you have any update about the FBI in Fulton County at all? Can you kind of give us any update?
Yeah, what I can tell you is I had talked to an individual last week who who told me that he had been called in by the FBI, and he went down and had an interview. And I actually called the lieutenant governor while I was on the phone with this gentleman, and we had a conversation with him. He's somebody I've known for a long time, somebody I trust, that's in the election integrity community. And he was able to give us some information of some other people that had been called in. So, and I had heard a rumor that the FBI was kind of around town kicking the tires, but that was the first confirmation that I got. And I obviously I had no clue that this, that this warrant was going to be issued. And I think that's the other important thing to remember is that the FBI had to go to the magistrate judge and had to present evidence. The magistrate judge had to find there was probable cause of a crime that had been committed to issue the warrant. And then the warrant was issued today, and it was served. And I was actually in the Senate Finance Committee while I was going down, but I had some friends who were down there, and they were sending me some photos of the box trucks backing up. And, it looks like we may finally get to the bottom of this. I'm reminded of going all the way back to 2020, sitting in William Ligon's committee. And I'll back up before that, actually. Okay. In November, myself and a few senators held a press conference, and we were told by leadership not to have the press conference. And we received emails from leadership discouraging us from doing that. But you can go find the picture. Tyler Harper was there. Jason Anafitarte wasn't elected yet, but he was there. Lindsey Tippins, I think maybe Randy Robertson, but I was the one that spoke on behalf of the team. And we called for audits. We called for investigations. We wanted to get to the bottom of it. A week or two later, December 4th, I believe, 4 of us released a call for a special session of the Georgia General Assembly. Myself, William Ligon, Brandon Beach, and Burt Jones. And then William Ligon added me to his committee that he basically had stood up underneath the Judiciary Committee, as I recall. I think that was the committee. And that's where Rudy Giuliani testified. That's when, and it wasn't just Rudy, it was people that I knew, Bridget Thorne, who I had known previously through church, and Susie Voiles, and Mr. Amick, and a number of other people that came in and testified to things they had seen that to me raised a lot of legitimate questions. And so it's kind of all come full circle, because the only thing that we've ever wanted was to have an investigation conducted. And, I saw online today something like, Trump has had these allegations thrown out in court 62 times. The fact pattern's never gone to court. It's always been dismissed on standing. And so this will be the first time that I know of that anyone's seen the ballots, has taken a close look at things. And I am very curious to know what it was that prompted the judge to issue that warrant.
Right. Yeah, the vindication is real. I mean, we've known for quite a while. It seems like Georgia's been the epicenter of election security issues, and been fighting for years. And it's like the further along we got, it was like, okay, Fulton County's just saying no, and then we have a Secretary of State that doesn't seem to care or want to do anything. And you guys have been grilling him hard lately. And it feels good, because I think we want are secure and free and fair elections. That's it. And it's been anything but. And so it's almost been like a roller coaster this last couple of months, because so many things are starting to unravel, right? And so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, and some of the stuff, there's been things that have happened behind the scenes back in 2023 when the CISA report came out in 2022. But back in 2023, we had some private meetings, myself, Burt Jones. So I own a software development company in my real life. Mm-hmm. And so when there's questions around technology, I kind of get sucked in.
Right.
So we went and met with the secretary and his team and talked about the fact that 5.5A, which is the version of the software that was certified in 2018, used in 2020, has been used in Georgia ever since. The fact that CISA had identified the 9 vulnerabilities. The first recommendation on the CISA report is to update the software. Mm-hmm. And so we basically started saying, look, it's one thing to have vulnerabilities. I would tell you that every piece of software has vulnerabilities. But when the vulnerabilities are enumerated on a website that the entire world can see, it's probably time to go ahead and update your software.
Right.
So, there's been a growing frustration for me personally. The answer at that point in time was basically, well, we'll do the analogy I used in committee when we started talking about it publicly was, well, we know the front door is unlocked, so we're just going to hope that we catch people with an audit before they get out the back door.
Yeah.
And there's nobody in any sort of security that would say, no, let's go ahead and put the lock on the front door as well. And that's where some of the frustrations come in. And so, I mean, we'll see, man. It's I'm actually shocked because I did not wake up this morning thinking that.
Yeah, that wasn't on your bingo card. It wasn't on mine either.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move along to before we're going to start into your kind of candidacy. So can you, as senator, can you give us a few updates? We're in I think week 3 now, right, of the legislative session. Can you give us some updates on where we're at with some bills and what are you looking at? What are you seeing inside the chambers there?
So this is year 2 of a biennial, right? So we all serve 2-year terms, which I would love to talk to you about why I think that's a problem. It creates a symbiotic relationship between the elected officials and the special interest. That's a different story. Every bill that was still alive last year is alive today. So in the Senate, we recommit all those back to committees. They've got to make their way out of committee again. They do the same thing in the House, but any bill that had previously crossed over. So my red tape rollback bill, for example, which Burt Jones called Georgia Does Doge. It wasn't really a Doge bill, but it was the moniker they put on it at the time. It's essentially a deregulation bill. That's already passed the Senate, so it's still sitting in the House. Okay. All the House bills that passed over to the Senate are still sitting in the Senate, but then all of us can drop additional bills. Okay. So today, for example, in the Senate Finance Committee, we heard a bill that I co-sponsored to remove the tax exemption for data centers. So we had a hearing on that bill. So the committee process is just kind of starting to churn a little bit. You'll see that activity pick up. Last week was what's called budget week. And so we didn't count those as any days, although we were down there for 3 days. And so for those of us that are on appropriations, we just heard testimony, starting with the governor, who gives us his version of the budget. And then all of the department and agency heads come in and talk about why they need more money. And, one thing that's interesting, I've got a zero-based budgeting bill because we don't do zero-based budgeting in Georgia. And I actually think that's probably one of the maybe the singular largest reform bills that you could pass.
I agree.
And I don't know if for the audience, basically what that means is the only thing that we look at every year is the addition to the budget. And then once that's approved as an addition, it goes into the base budget. We never see a breakdown of the base budget. We don't even see any evidence that's what the money is being spent for. We just see the next year's requests, and then we layer that on top of so the base budget gets layered on top of each other every year. We really need to crack that open on a regular basis and force the agencies to crack it open as well to ensure that what we think we're spending the money on is what we're actually spending the money on.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a Doge in its own right if we were actually looking at the budget? I mean, this is common sense type stuff that is coming up. I love it, but it's like, why are we not already to this point? That's the question. It's ridiculous, but I get it. I do know that you have started becoming vocal about the data centers, and I appreciate that because we'll have a follow-up question on that. But absolutely, I think we need to take a good hard look at it. What the things we're doing, we've been looking at some gun bills. Obviously, we got a really good positive bill passed first day, but that's always going to be a fight. So anything else or I tell you what, let's do this because we want to conserve our time. Can you just give us a picture of the taxes? Now, some of us have been following everything you guys are doing. So kind of walk us through this income tax, exactly kind of put it in layman's terms for us about what is actually going to happen or take place.
Yeah, so Georgia right now is at 5.19% tax rate. We were at 6% for years. The history of the income tax in Georgia, it was put into place in 1929, so it's a little bit less than 100 years old. When we talk about eliminating the state income tax, people think it's radical. I'm like, no. We've survived longer. We existed as a state and a colony longer without an income tax than we did with one. And America, the 16th Amendment of the United States is what allowed the federal government to come into your paycheck and tax your labor.
Right.
And I would tell you, I think I would love to see that repealed. And I would love to see us move to a fair tax across the board where we do not essentially receive the leftover money after the government oligarchs take what they deem they should take and they give us what's left over. I think it's un-American.
Yeah.
So top line, let's just call it a $40 billion budget, plus or minus $1 billion. depending on where we land this year. But 16 billion of that will come from the income tax. So it's actually less than half of our budget comes from the income tax. Other sources are, 4 cents on the dollar that you pay at the cash register and in the sales tax goes to the state. Your gasoline excise tax, 31.5 cents, I believe, on the gallon. It's a fixed rate per gallon, goes to the state. But 16 billion is the number to remember for the income tax. And what we have laid out is a plan to get that to zero by 2032. The first step would be by essentially moving the standard deduction to $50,000 this year for a single individual, $100,000 for a couple filing jointly, as well as lower the rate to 4.99% this year. But here's the key, Roy.
Okay.
And you'll find this on the last page of the report. And it's the only thing that I asked to be in the report. I asked for one thing, and that is a cap on state spending with a base year plus inflation, so that we cannot allow what's happened in the last 20 years in government to continue, which has been, we basically spend, we do have a reserve, we've saved some, but we largely spend what comes in. And if we have a per capita cap on state spending that it's tied to inflation, right now, if your revenue and your expenditures are doing this and you flatten out that expenditure and your revenue stays up, you then create a gap that allows you to lower that rate. And so that's what we think will happen.
Okay.
In addition to that, so I told you 16 billion in revenue, there's $30 billion in carve-outs. Okay. Now, some of those carve-outs are things you don't want to get rid of. For example, you don't pay sales tax on groceries, right? We don't want to get rid of that. When you go get your oil changed, you pay sales tax on the oil itself, but you don't pay sales tax on the labor. You don't pay your accountant sales tax. We don't want to get rid of those.
Right.
But there are billions of dollars of other credits. There's the yacht tax credit that a bunch of Republicans voted in. I think it was 2016 or something like that. This data center tax credit, a bunch of Republicans,
Yes.
2018. Now the film tax credit, another big one, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, you can make the case that some of these, they bring industry, but I haven't seen one yet that returns the money to the state coffers that it takes out of the state coffers ever. And so all of these are expenses. And so that's another area that we can look at capturing. You mentioned I've been speaking up on the data centers lately. I've been speaking up on the tax credits for a long, long time. I voted against every one of them that I've ever noticed. Some may have been stuck into a bill and I didn't notice it, but the Senate has really been leading on this. We had a study committee that I was on 2 summers ago to look into these tax credits and essentially look at the ROI to the state. And it was abysmal. And so there's now a lot of inertia and a lot of energy around looking into that, because we recognize that we've got to get the spending under control. We've got to get the tax credits reined in a little bit, level the playing field for all Georgians, get that rate down, and let's let this economy roar, man. Because if you go from 5.19 down to 0, and we're competing now with a level playing field with Florida, Tennessee, and Texas, we're going to shine.
Yeah, that's been one of my questions for a long time. We've got states all around us with no income tax, and then it just seems like we've always been throwing this thing peanuts. So this feels like it has some teeth in it. A follow-up question on that would be: is there any kind of hidden, pushes for other entities or interests to take up some of that tax? Like, we're not going to just replace. We're not talking about a replacement of the taxes going away, right? We're talking about a true, lowering of the income tax to nothing. All right,
That's
with
the
your
plan.
zero budgeting, right? Okay,
That's the plan that we put out there. Now, I've browsed. The House is working on a property tax reform, which I think is actually maybe more needed. It's hard to say this tax cut's better, but property taxes to me are completely un-American.
and it's a sin tax.
Yeah. And so it's a life tax.
Yeah.
It's like, it's an existence tax. At least if I'm going to go smoke a cigarette or, go buy Jack Daniels, that's a choice. I've got to live somewhere.
That's right.
And the idea that I've got to pay the government to live in my own home is crazy. But I did see that the House intends to essentially move to a consumption tax to offset the property taxes. That's not what we've proposed to do on the income tax side. And so, just so that people don't get confused between those two things. There's multiple conversations happening simultaneously.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's all happening at one time, and it's like I thought last year was kind of hard to keep up with. This year, it's like swimming in the sea. I'm like, okay, every other day there's something else to focus on. So yeah, it's moving quickly. But again, I think this is a positive direction. It's pro-human. It's pro-family. It's more money in our pocket, and we can do better as Georgians. So I appreciate that. All right, man. So we're gonna. I'm watching the time here. I don't want to keep you forever tonight. I want to get into your candidacy. So you've been in the state senate. I want you to tell people, who you are, where you come from, how long you've been in the Senate, and what has made you decide to run for lieutenant governor.
Yes, I've been in the Senate this is my 8th session. Okay. So I got elected in 2018. I ran against two guys that we're both. One guy was a previous elected official in the community. One guy was a business leader. And I was a young guy in my 30s that really just felt compelled that we were in a fight to save America. And people thought I was crazy when I said that 8 years ago, but people see it a little more clearly now.
Right.
And I believe actually now we're in a fight to save the West. I think that we save the West by saving America. And providentially, I think we save America by saving Georgia. And so I'm just a small business owner. We've got a technology company here in Forsyth County. I've been blessed to be able to start some other businesses along the way as well. My wife and I have been married for 18 years. We've got 4 kids between the ages of 7 and 13, and it's a lot of fun. And so I'm kind of your typical member of a citizen legislature. We're off on Friday of this week, and I'll be back in my office, grinding at my office. I had to fly out to California to help produce the annual meeting for Chick-fil-A over the weekend, which is an event that I've taken part in for the last, decade plus. And so I'm juggling,
Right.
earning a living to pay my bills and serving in the General Assembly. But, I have seen in the Senate, I've served under 2 lieutenant governors, and I've had the opportunity to pass some really significant pieces of legislation. The Riley Gaines Act was my bill. The Georgia Promise Scholarship Act was my bill. The bill banning DEI mandates in K through 12 public schools was my bill. And all of those bills moved under Burt Jones.
Okay.
And I have seen what a lieutenant governor who has a core ideological worldview and the backbone to fight for it, I have seen the difference that makes. Mm-hmm. And so we ultimately, my family and I, decided to run for lieutenant governor the evening of September 10th. And so I was in a meeting, actually, I'll say it publicly. I was in a meeting with Georgia gun owners. And Alex was sitting across the table from me in my office, and he held up his phone and showed me the video of Charlie Kirk being assassinated.
Yeah. Wow.
And we stopped, and he and I prayed in that meeting for Charlie and his family. And I came home and I sat down with my wife and our 2 oldest kids and told them what they would be seeing, because I wanted them to hear it from us and not from wherever they might see it. And then that night, Natalie and I had a conversation, and we just decided it's time to double down on being bold. The veil was removed for me. This is no longer a left versus right fight. This is a light versus dark fight. And we were just compelled that we need somebody bold leading the Georgia State Senate. And I think that if you look at my legislative record, there have been a number of times, whether it was the guy leading the very first press conference after the 2020 election, or the guy writing the resolution to form the Senate Special Committee on Investigations to go after Fonnie Willis. I've been the guy time and time again that has stood up when maybe it hasn't been the most popular thing to do, but it was the right thing to do. And I think that you don't elect people necessarily. Well, I know you don't elect people for the good times. You elect people for the times where it's rough, where you believe that they have the capacity and the ability to stand up and fight for what they believe in. And so that's what ultimately that's why we decided to get in the race.
Wow. Yeah, I think that was a true turning point with Charlie Kirk, and I don't think we've been the same since, and we're still reeling from that. And wow, yeah, that's powerful, man. All right, so I want to ask you your own question. I want you to define this. What is the role of government, in your opinion?
So that's a cheat question for me because I've thought about it a lot. But let me tell you 2 things. One, and I'll get to the question, but America is not just a country, but it's an idea. And the idea this year is 250 years old. We are reaching the average lifespan, or even the long and tooth lifespan, for your average superpower or empire. And I think there's an open question as to whether or not our idea survives until we're 350 years old. And the idea is enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, and it's the idea of God-given inalienable rights. And that was the unique thing about the foundation of America, was that we were the first country that did a couple of different things. But we enshrined in our founding document that rights don't come from a king, they don't come from man, but they come from God. And I think that that idea itself is under attack today. But the next sentence of the Declaration of Independence goes on to say, and I'll quote, that to secure these rights, what rights? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are formed among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed. And so there you have two separate things. You have the role of government to secure rights, and you have the uniquely American idea that government rests on the shoulders and derives its power from people, as opposed to people deriving their power from the government, which is what most forms of human governance is set up until that point in time in history. So our job is just to secure rights. Our job is not to provide, social welfare from cradle to grave. Our job is not to go out and solve all of society's problems. Our job is not to micromanage the economy. Our job is not to get into a lot of things that government has managed to find its way into. And the reason that I vote no so many times in the state Senate, even in a Republican state Senate, is that we often wade into things that is not the role of government. And if I find us forming some new entity to regulate something we've got no business regulating, I better be voting no, because that's not our job.
Yeah. Which leads me to my next question. So constitutionally, I think, and you probably know this, but little me, we go down to the Capitol, and I've been told by several legislators that you even mention the word Constitution, they'll laugh at you behind your back. But isn't that sort of like a problem we face? Like if we were governing more by the Constitution and the principles rather than those things you mentioned, I think we'd be in better shape. Do you agree with that?
100% at the state level, the federal level, and the local level.
Yeah.
But I think that I remember back in 2020 during COVID, and keep in mind, Roy, I'm in like a 73-27 Republican Democrat district.
Okay.
And I did not make my kids wear masks to school. I actively and heavily lobbied for Forsyth County schools to get our kids back in classrooms. And I wasn't the only one doing that. Not the reason they did it, but they did it. But we saw the dominoes falling. Fulton, Gwinnett, Cobb, DeKalb, and Forsyth and Cherokee stood their ground. But I remember being on my phone in my office, and I went to my office every day during COVID because I just wasn't afraid. And I remember talking to so many of my constituents. And the only other time I've had more phone calls than COVID was after the 2020 election. And my constituents were like, shut it down. There's going to be blood on your hands. Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And these were good Republican people, but they were watching whatever news program with the live death counter.
Yes.
And it was just the fear porn that was all over television, and people were freaked out. And we were one of the states that mostly got it right. Yeah. In terms of the way that we handled it. We did not get it perfect, but we got it mostly right.
No, I'll agree.
And that's with an eye towards our job is to secure rights. And you should have the right to get up and go earn a living for your family.
Absolutely.
Even if it's a respiratory virus.
Absolutely. So in Georgia, and this is just my opinion, all right, and just getting into politics and getting, Georgia is #1 state of agriculture. But it seems like that Georgia, is the #1 place for corporations. I'm speaking to myself here. It seems like we're getting caught up in the technocratic revolution. We're putting businesses before communities. Do you feel that way, or what is your take on Georgia? We're supposed to be small communities, the heart of the South, but it just seems like Georgia's outgrowing itself. Do you agree with that, or what's your take on it?
I do. I remember after the 2018 election, which was the same year I got elected, it's the same year Brian Kemp got elected. And Governor Kemp won that election by about 45,000 votes, which is a razor thin margin in a state of, 11 million people. And the next thing it seemed like I was hearing was that we were working on bringing Amazon HQ2 to Atlanta. And I'm like, what are we doing? Every one of those people is going to be coming from California.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we want to move, 6,000 Californians here in one fell swoop, or 10,000 or whatever?
Right.
And this ties to the state income tax for me, because we have small business owners leaving the state every month, every week because of our income tax. We don't have small businesses choosing to locate to Georgia because of our income tax. And I think that we need to have an eye towards the growth of small businesses, which employ about 92% of Georgians. So if you think about my company, we started small, we started in the basement, and we were small we're still small. We're 75 or so employees. But our ethos is different. I can tell you whose wife just became an OBGYN and passed the medical boards. I can tell you whose father passed away a couple of months ago. And there's just a different ethos that I think is very compatible with our values here in Georgia, that small businesses have, that multinational corporations just do not have. And so I am not hell-bent on this, massive desire to go attract 50, more multinational corporations to come to Georgia. If they want to come and we compete and we win on a level playing field, then so be it. I hope that they're successful. I hope they employ a lot of Georgians and pay them well. But we've got to look out for the small businesses here more than we look out for the corporations. And the challenge, Roy, is the small businesses, for the most part, don't have lobbyists.
Yeah.
And so when we walk in and out of the chamber every day, we're not being bugged to think about, NFIB's down there, the National Federation of Independent Businesses. And, there's organizations that do some of that work. But at scale, you're largely dealing with, man, I walked in, sorry, my brain's all over the place. I walked into the Senate Finance Committee today, and people were hanging from the ceiling. It was so crowded in there. And then it hit me. Oh, this is the data center bill. And this is all of the lobbyists. I'm like, I know a lot of these guys. I see them in the hallway. I've talked to them, whatever. Like, I didn't know you had a data center. I didn't know you had, whoever. And so you begin to see, especially on that committee, because that's the tax committee.
Right.
And so that's the committee that's the honeypot. And so you really see at that point kind of how wide the reach is of the special interests. And
yes.
And so, yeah, you're right. Your sense is not wrong.
I mean, I'm just saying, Georgia's been my home. I'm a Chicago native, spent most of my life down here, fell in love with this state, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. A lot of people are very concerned because let's talk about the data centers. The data centers are something I've known about for a long time. I worked in the union for a few years. I had friends that worked on them in other states, but when you hear that Georgia could be the number one state of data centers, and then you simultaneously look, and all of your county commissions have already plotted 3 data centers right in your backyard, and with no concern to the community, no concern with the water, electricity that they're going to use. People start freaking out a little bit. I don't think anybody's anti-business, or we don't want, we want to prosper, but when these kinds of things start taking over and they become like precedent, you start to feel like, well, this is sort of anti-human, and we need to be all in that conversation together. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Okay.
And I think you layer in the fact that the average residential ratepayer that as of last year, the last 2 years, let's call it the last 3 years, their average annual power bill has gone up $480. That's real money.
Yes.
And that people feel like, and they're not wrong, that is tied to some of because 2 of those 6 rate increases, 2 of those were due to Plant Vogtle. Mm-hmm. And so people are not wrong to associate that with these large load customers. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to pass a law last year to require large load customers to pay their pro rata share of the capacity expansion. We ran into a buzzsaw on that. Again, did not know that so many lobbyists worked in that space, but I learned very quickly because I asked some questions in the Regulated Industries Committee, and they were in my office the next morning. And so, yeah, you try to do something you think is pretty common sense and pretty straightforward. And you learn real quick that you're gonna have to fight to get it through.
Yeah, agreed. So a question for you, becoming a lieutenant governor, obviously we're going to be coming out of sort of like Brian Kemp's been in there 8 years, this administration, things are going to be changing next year. The confidence level in most anybody that you talk to, right? I don't think this is out of line to say that a lot of people don't trust government. They don't trust our legislators. They don't trust the process and the system, right? And so if you were to move into this position, Lieutenant Governor, and we're going to see a change, now what would you do to fix the trust and the bring the people kind of back together where government and the community can work together?
Yeah, I think some of that's just availability, and it's tough. I mean, I'm not gonna dog on either the speaker, the governor, or lieutenant governor for not doing a podcast like this or something like that. I mean, I left my house at 5:45 this morning. It's 9:45. I didn't even eat dinner with my family. So there are elements of it that you've got to be realistic, but I do think being available, I think that making yourself available to people, and I do think that, that some members of government have done a good job of that. I would just encourage anybody to go back and look at who was tweeting back in after November of 2020, who was available, who was meeting with constituents, who was taking phone calls, who was updating people online, and who was hiding under their desk and had zero presence on social media. That will be a very good indication of what somebody's going to do, because it's real easy to come around and, to the parades and be a beauty queen. But it's a lot more difficult when people have tough questions to listen, to have conversations, deal with those questions, see what you can do to help get to the bottom of whatever the issue is. Right. And so I think that that's a piece of it. And I think that social media is honestly the best place to do that. It just is.
Yeah, I mean the landscape's changing. I'm just a nobody running my mouth up here, and it's just like, well, the technology's here and the desire is here. Because I think that I always use this analogy. When the people, I don't blame government for everything, right? Because it's the same thing. Our basic human instincts, whether the child at the cookie jar. When the parents aren't looking, the child's going to grab a cookie. I mean, that's just the way things work, right? So we have to create a partnership between, we got to get off the couch and stop watching, with a bowl of potato chips and say, hey, we're going to work together to make this better, right? And without those checks and balances, obviously things are going to get out of control, That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and one of the things, I'll just be transparent, one of the things I love about you is you talk to elected officials, whether you agree with them or not, you talk to them like they're human beings. And you try to relate and help them understand who you are and why you think what you think. And I will tell you, like back in 2020, again, like I was taking the same phone call from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And you can imagine for a month straight giving people the same information. You're having hundreds of phone calls all on the same topic. It gets frankly pretty exhausting. And there was some lady that started screaming at me, well, I pay your salary and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I did not say, look, lady, like this, whatever, $18,000 income is, does not go to feed, the wife and the 4 kids. But I did say, well, ma'am, I've got, 220,000 constituents. I make X amount of dollars. This is how much you pay me. And if you'd like a refund, I will send you a check. And she's like, I thought you guys made $200,000 a year.
Yeah, well,
like, no, ma'am.
That's another problem.
Yeah. And so it was a productive conversation in the end. But I say all that to say that I think that part of the struggle for the grassroots and the reason that the establishment calls you guys the crazies behind closed doors and has all sorts of pejoratives that they use is there's a sense that they're just receiving a bunch of, that there's not a dialogue. And I think that to the extent that we can have a dialogue, I started in this business as an activist. I stood on the side of the road that I wanted widened in Forsyth County. I started a website. I made push cards. I asked people to go sign a petition to get the road widened, and it worked. And I was hooked. Yeah. And so I think that for the people that, and a lot of us get into this because we want to take something like that to a bigger level. Right. But the challenge becomes, and so think about the competing interests here. I've got one guy that wants to buy me a steak dinner and is going to take me on vacation in the summer and wants to put my whole family up at the Cloister for 2 weeks at Sea Island.
Bring it. And
I've got another guy that just wants to call me 9 times and scream at me. And won't even put a yard sign in his, in his yard, kind of a thing. It's like, human nature is going to gravitate towards, the affirmation. And so I think that it's incumbent on us to ensure that we don't fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, you'll never see me winning the Golden Fork Award for getting the most free dinners. Because I think it's dangerous. I think it's a trap. And so it's incumbent on us to not fall into that. But I do think that you've got to, when I'm lobbying my congressman, when I'm asking Rich McCormick to get something done, I'm having a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing I'd like to compliment you on, because I've noticed that you have the ability to do that. And I do think it's why you've got, you haven't just been shut down by elected officials.
Well, I'm trying not to. We have to keep the conversation going, and we've got so many problems, and I think we get super laser focused on that main problem that we can see, but we're not given enough grace to understand that there's so many moving parts of this machine. So, we could probably delve off into all kinds of things, but what point would it be? Because we need to know where you stand on running the government, right? And that's the bottom line. We can. We're just trying to understand each other, and I'm all about the education. You brought up that point about somebody thinking that you make $220,000 a year. It was only a couple of years ago that I realized we even had a separate millage rate for, schools in our county. So we're learning every day, and if we're not talking and we're not learning, then we're kicking ourselves in the behind. And so we're going to keep this thing rolling as long as we can, buddy. But and I appreciate people like you coming on the show. I've absolutely. I hope that we can get more, because understanding can only be reached this way. So I want to ask a couple more questions, because I just see the comments going like crazy. So
I can't see them, by the way. Otherwise,
yes, I wish I could share the comments with you, but I can't unless you're in the room. And folks, we're only going to be reading the questions, right? So comments, I'm sure, Greg, you can go back and have a field day with the comments. So. And we'll definitely delve into that in a moment. A couple things near and dear to my heart, specifically, where do you stand on the Constitution as far as I would start with the First Amendment, and what's near and dear to me is the Second Amendment. You as Lieutenant Governor, are you for First Amendment, Second Amendment?
I don't think you're going to have anybody come on your podcast and say that I'm against the First or the Second Amendments. Let me unpack it a little bit more than that, and maybe put a little bit more skin on that question. The First Amendment is a restriction of government. The First Amendment does not, it doesn't give you a right. The First Amendment recognizes your God-given inalienable right and restricts government from infringing upon that right. So when we look at censorship bills, when we look at things like that, that's the reason why we oppose those kinds of bills. The reason that I'm not taking some of the crazy people off my social media that like to say all sorts of personal things that I wish they wouldn't say, is because, hey, that's their First Amendment right. And if that's how they want to live their life, that's kind of on them. On the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. And, we're getting blasted every day by the Democrats, over the Minneapolis situation. And I will say that I think that the first response to the Minneapolis situation was wrong. I do not think that it is an indictment of someone, the fact that they carried a weapon. Now, what they did in the course of carrying that weapon is 100% a problem. And we know that individual interfered with law enforcement's activity. But to say that the mere presence of someone carrying a weapon meant that they wanted to commit a massacre, that's just not necessarily.
Yeah, that was a bad narrative for the Republican Party to run on. We don't take enough discernment in these situations. Everybody, especially in this culture, Greg, everybody wants to be the first one to make the judgment call and to be the first. And I try to just slow down a little bit and say, hey, let's discern this a little bit. And now look at 4 days later, we're seeing other videos come out. We're seeing that there's a possibility that his gun went off before this whole. I mean, like, guys, calm down a little bit. Let's look at this thing. But go ahead.
Yeah. But since I've been in the legislature, we've passed constitutional carry, which was something that I ran on and something that we were able to get done, move the needle on that. It's probably the most significant bill. But obviously we got Colton's bill done at the start of the session to ensure that Savannah couldn't go rogue. SAPA, the Second Amendment Protection Act, is something I've co-sponsored. I'll probably be dropping it again this year.
Wonderful.
I'm working actually to try to figure out, there's an enhanced standard ground law that I'm looking at as well. Right. Trying to figure out which one of those two I might be able to get done. That's really the question. Politics is the art of the possible. I'm having some conversations behind the scenes to see what we might be able to to move there.
Okay.
But yes, I believe that 100% the Second Amendment is under attack. I will tell you that the amendment I don't get asked enough about is the 10th Amendment. And the
Okay.
10th Amendment states that any power not enumerated to the federal government in the Constitution is reserved for the states, and this is the important part, and the people.
There you
And
go.
we don't always get that "and the people" part in there, but that is what the text says. And I'm a huge believer in the federalist system. I believe the federal government has overreached on so many areas. I believe that we should abolish probably half of the agencies that exist in the federal government,
Yes.
starting with the Department of Education. Roy, I'm not a spring chicken, but I am older than the Federal Department of Education.
Right. 79 is when they
Yep.
created it. And you do the research, and people don't understand that it was only created in 1979, folks. I mean, we can do better than this. So, yeah. Again, that's part of the education. But, okay, great. And I'm glad that's a point for bringing up the 10th Amendment. Okay, so we have serious mental health issues in this country, and this is a newer question to me because obviously I was very against. I believe it was HB 581 that kind of dropped. It was pretty much to me. This is a couple years ago, a draconian mental health care bill that probably it helped a lot of very few individuals more than it would help out. The state. I know that as we move further, we're going to have to deal with this, right? So kind of give us your kind of vision on mental health. We've got a lot of problems. We're facing drug problems. We're facing child trafficking problems, all these things. And mental health is a crisis. So do you have sort of a vision or a plan on that?
Yeah, my vision and plan is to not instinctually look to the government as the first solver of that problem.
Amen.
Because I don't believe that you can throw enough money at the problem to solve it. Is there a role for government in institutionalizing people that need to be institutionalized? Yes. Should we have shut the Milledgeville down and turned our local jails into our mental health facilities? No. Is some big government omnibus bill the answer? It's not. 581 was the I'm trying to think, not prequel, but it was the follow-on bill to 1013.
Right.
And 1013, when it came out of the House, had a number of issues. It aligned mental illness with the DSM-5 manual that included, transgenderism essentially as a mental illness, and would have likely facilitated taxpayer-funded sex change surgeries, for example. We were concerned about that. So we were able to move. There were about 7 to 8 significant objections that Philip Singleton and a number of us that worked on that bill together identified back in the day. We were able to get those pulled completely out of the bill before we ultimately voted for it. And I think that that's kind of the step, is to resist the urge that just because society is struggling with something, the government needs to come in and solve the problem. I believe that in a properly functioning society, the families, the churches, and the charities will be the first in line to help solve those problems. But instinctually now, the first answer is for, unfortunately, all 3 of those entities, families, churches, and charities, to turn to government first. So I do believe that we have a problem where our jails have turned into our mental health centers. I do believe that we need more state-funded beds for those who are in significant crisis. But I also believe in the role of the private sector to step in for those that are not in crisis, to help provide care to those. And frankly, it is up to us as citizens to help contribute to that effort. I believe that the process of taking my money and running it through the government laundry washing machine, if you will, and trying to spit out a solution is the most inefficient way to solve problems.
Right.
And so I would tell you that I believe the bulk of the mental health problems need to be solved locally. I think that there is a state role, but I think it's a secondary role. I think that a lot of the mental health challenges are a result of what's happening with a number of things, from the breakdown of the family, to violence in video games, to violence in movies, to pornography,
Our culture,
to a number of the
degenerate
things
culture.
that are plaguing the culture. And so, sorry, my 13-year-old just got home. Hi. And so,
Okay.
yeah, man, it's obviously it's a huge challenge.
I mean,
but
I think it's only gonna get worse until we figure out together how we deal with this that benefits the people. Absolutely. All right. I've got one final question for me, and then we're going to comment. So I just want your overall take. we're in a Trump presidency, Donald Trump, a lot of things going on with Trump. We're watching every single day. A lot of great things that are going on, a lot of questionable things that are going on. So how are you standing if you were to get this position? Is Georgia going to be with Trump? What's your 30,000-foot view of the Trump administration right now?
Look, I think this is a transformational presidency. I think that we are trying to right a lot of things that are wrong when you are swinging the pendulum back after 4 years of horrible economic policy, horrible open borders policies, horrible injection of DEI and neo-Marxism into every area of life and government. It is going to seem jarring when you and we're also simultaneously removing all of the sugar high of the money printing. It's going to seem to some people uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with it, man, because I think that we've got a country to save. I think that the republic will not survive 50 more years, wouldn't survive 20 more years in the trajectory that we were on before. And look, our president is a New York street fighter, and he is going to do things that no other president would be willing to do. And some people may find that a little uncomfortable. Frankly, I think that some of us in the South, it seems a little uncouth or unbecoming because it's not necessarily our culture. But the reality is he is accomplishing more than any president in my lifetime. I was happy to write personal checks to him in all 3 times that he ran for president. I'm happy to support him all 3 of those times, and then proud for the work that he's doing. I'm not apologizing for our president.
Gotcha.
And I'm not backing away because I believe that if you look at what's happened from the start of when he came in and the way that they've moved the needle on a number of things that Republicans have always talked about, this is what we've asked for, and this is what we voted for.
Yep. He needs our continued prayer and support. And we've got to whip this Congress into shape and get some of these things done before it's too late. So
we got to end the filibuster, Roy. The Senate needs to confirm as many of our judges as we can.
Yeah.
Because those federal appointments last a lifetime. That may be how you ultimately save the republic, is by getting enough of our judges in that have a strict constructionalist view of the Constitution. They're not radicals.
Right.
And the Democrats would do it. So we should be doing the same thing. If we find out that the Section 2 of the NVRA gets struck in the next 4 weeks in Georgia, we should redistrict here in Georgia as well.
Right.
You have to understand the fight that you're in, and you can't back down.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so complex, man. It's hard to wrap your mind around. So, all right. Wonderful. Okay. So let me go back up. We got a lot of comments here. Whoa. Okay. Guys, we're going to be reading the questions, and Greg, I encourage you to go back into the comments. You can answer the constituents. So, all right. So first up, we got Carol Streeter. Thank you for being here. Sharon Holland, Christina Benjamin, wonderful. Denise Penley Owens. Wow, good to see all you. Christopher Rayleigh, good to see you, sir. Sandra Smith Bearden, good to see you. She says, did the bill that criminalizes supposed election misinformation pass? Who decides what is misinformation? I believe that she's referring to Bill SB 9. Maybe you want to go ahead and I'll give you the context here and what happened with that bill.
Yeah, so we talked about that at the top of the show, but that did not pass. The Senate used a procedural movement called, actually, that was on War Room that I talked about that, actually.
Yes,
Sorry,
you were on War Room today. Okay, gotcha.
Senate Bill 9, we disagreed with what the House added. So that's a procedural move where we will send that bill to conference committee. It basically said we don't agree with the addition of what the House put in there as the Senate. Right. That received what's called unanimous consent. It didn't even go to the floor for a vote because nobody objected.
Okay.
So that was essentially the entire chamber, bipartisan, saying we're going to go back to the Senate's original position.
Right. And the original bill was to protect children from the maluse of AI and pornography. There was another addition that was tacked on, which was basically to add that to elections and candidacies and things like that. And you guys removed that, passed the bill in its original form, correct?
We just did a disagree. So the bill is not yet passed in its original form. It would now go to the House, could either what they call recede from their position, or they could insist. If they insist, it goes to conference committee. So it's not done yet.
Oh, okay.
We essentially said today that we disagreed with their move with the bill, the version that they passed, which added on the election stuff.
Okay, so that's a good piece of information. I was told that it was voted on today, so it's still there, and we still got to watch it and make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that update. Let's see here. Jody White, good to see you. Christopher Rayleigh. Let's see. I'm only reading the questions, guys. Good to see everybody here tonight. Good to see you, Ray Blankenship, Earl Klein. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. That was one of my questions. So let's go with that. I did skip out on that. But so going back to our original election integrity, obviously, we know that Georgia is the only state that has a contract with Dominion. A lot of folks are very unhappy with Dominion. We want it gone. What are your thoughts on election security? Do you support paper ballots, hand counted, hand marked? Where do you see us going with election integrity?
Yes. And again, I keep getting confused with what I talked with Antonio about earlier. So I have sponsored more bills, specifically 3, to go to paper ballots than anyone in the General Assembly. So the most recent one, 303, Colton Moore, Steve Gooch, and myself. Going all the way back to 2021, Burt Jones had a bill that I was a co-sponsor of. We had another one, I think, in 23, if memory serves correct. We weren't getting hearings for those under Duncan. And then we passed a bill that is not perfect, but there's a bill sitting in the state house that would go to paper ballots. Okay. That, by the way, is also the correct answer to the question of what I was asking the Secretary of State last week, is that we can pull the lever on the emergency provision that's currently in state law based on the vulnerabilities that have been identified and go towards a paper ballot scenario. So, look, I think that it should be election day, not election month. I think that we should move away from no excuse absentee voting and require voting in person, because the bulk of the fraud exposure, I think, is in the mail-in ballots. Mm-hmm. There's a number of things I think that we have done that have shored up another number of other areas around election integrity that were part of Senate Bill 202 and 189. But there is still definitely more work to do there, and it's been an uphill slog, man. I mean, we've had some of these conversations in private where we've been pushing on the second floor, specifically the Secretary's office, as it relates to the CISA report, the 9 known vulnerabilities that they identified back in 2022, the fact that we're still using Dominion software version 5.5A, which essentially has the 9 listed vulnerabilities that everybody in the public can see. We do not need to go towards, new printers, new this, new that. We have an easy solution that we know that we can go to. A number of people are already voting on paper. That's what I would keep telling you. Those absentee people are voting by paper. We could do that uniformly across the state.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to see Dominion voting systems gone. I would love to see a comprehensive paper, hand marked, hand counted. And, a lot of people bring up this same day voting, and I understand, there's a lot of people that are disabled. There's a lot of people that might have trouble. Obviously, this plan would include those people too.
Yes.
So I always want to bring that up.
You're sick, you're infirm, you're UACAVA, yes. You're overseas military. You obviously provide provisions for that. But ultimately what you're saying is there's a reason why FedEx exists. And you use FedEx because the mail is going to screw things up far too often. Yeah. And similarly, the idea, if you were to ask me, Roy, if I could take back one vote, there's a few that I would take back. But the one that I would take back at the top of the list would be the emergency orders in COVID, because we were told at the time that those would be renewed every 30 days. They were not. I won't get into who pulled the rug out from underneath us on that, because it's not important. But the only reason that we were able to go to the drop boxes, the only reason the 6.8 million absentee ballot request forms were sent out with a first class stamp, the only reason that there was the mobile voting units that went into 81% Democrat precincts in Fulton County was because of the emergency powers in Georgia are either off or they're on. It's like a lever that you pull. And when we gave the power to the governor to essentially oversee the COVID funds, the administration of the nurses, the staying up at the State Farm Arena, all of this, the World Congress Center, all the stuff that we did, Brad Raffensperger also received emergency powers as well. And you're essentially making somebody a king.
Gotcha.
And we were told that would be required to be renewed by the legislature. And that got changed, or we were lied to, one of the two. And the fact that we were not in an emergency situation. In November of 2020, we certainly were not in January of 2021 when the Loeffler-Purdue elections happened. We should have been out from underneath that.
Impeccable timing, by the way. Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. Let's see here. Let's see, guys. There's some good comments in here, y'all. Good to see Christopher Rayleigh back out again. It's been a while, Chris. All right. There, Denise Pendley Owens has a question. I'm hearing there's a bill in the works that will take candidate qualifying away from the parties. Is this true? If so, who is authoring it?
I haven't heard it. I'm not saying there's not one. I haven't heard of it. So I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
It may be a House bill that I just haven't heard about. I've not heard talk of that bill in the Senate.
I've heard it too, but again, like I said, she's not alone. We've all heard that, but nothing you know of right now. Okay. Let's see here. Blake replying. Good to see you, Michael Shane Cowan, Jennifer White. Thank y'all for commenting. Let's see. Sandra. Bo Brown. Good evening, Bo Brown. And he thinks that Blake Tillery's got this thing wrapped up. So let's see. Christopher Rayleigh. Here we go. Christina Benjamin asks, will closing the primaries be made a priority this session? SB 370, elections and primaries, closed primaries provide. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's my bill.
Okay.
So I wrote it, and
okay.
I'm not getting a ton of traction on it. I'll be honest with you.
Gotcha.
I think that Republicans should choose our nominee. I think the Democrats should choose their nominee. I think I've got 4 or 5 co-sponsors on that. Colton signed it. I think Jason Anavatarte signed it. There may have been 1 or 2 other ones.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard this or not. You know, the jungle primary story, which I just found out recently, was something that was looked at back when Ralston was in the House, and they had a bill to stop these jungle primaries and get everything straightened out, and then Kemp vetoed that bill. And so now here we are. It's like, why don't we have closed primaries in the state? Why do we have to do these jungle primaries? It always seems to benefit one side of the coin here. Why aren't we making it more fair, more free? You know, I don't understand.
I'll tell you the other thing, Roy, that's happening is there's a big push to move a lot of these local elections to nonpartisan.
Yes.
I voted against one bill last year to move some judges to nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was judges. I maybe
it's a tactic, man. Yeah.
But they want to do it for school boards. They want to do it for county commissions. I'm like, heck no. I want somebody to have to come to my Republican Party meeting.
Right. That's right.
Stand up in front of the GOP voters and say why they should be the nominee. I want them to go run against a Democrat. I want them to run against a Libertarian, a Green Party candidate, whoever's in the race.
Exactly.
And then figure it out. But I think that the primaries have such value. I will tell you, they have value as a candidate. Mm-hmm. I remember I was the first guy to announce in my state Senate race. And I remember thinking, man, I just hope I don't get any opposition, right? Because it's just life is easier that way. And when I had some other guys get in the race, some members of my team were like, I'm happy this happened. It's going to make you better. You're going to have to think about issues you've never thought about before. It's going to prepare you to be a legislator, and it's going to put you on the record for a number of issues that you're going to be able to refer back to. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. So back during the Summer of Love in 2020, when all the mostly peaceful protests were happening, we took a vote on a hate crime bill. And Jeff Duncan had put a hate crime bill and made a deal with the Democrats, put a hate crime bill on the floor, had rammed it through the Rules Committee, put a sub in. And I would venture to say that if of the 34 Republicans who were in the chamber, if you would have asked any of them a year earlier, do you believe that there should be sentence enhancement penalties based on the race, sex, gender, religion of the victim? What do you think? I think most Republicans would say, I think that's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. I don't think that the raping of somebody else's wife that is Asian should be separate from someone else's wife who is Jewish versus Black in terms of sentencing. But there was a lot of pressure. But I was on the record because I've been asked that question at a forum. I'd articulated my answer to that question before the election, and we met for caucus that morning, and we said, we're going to tell Duncan we're boss, and we're going to table the bill, and we don't appreciate him making a deal with the Democrats. And we walked across for the actual chamber session, and everybody folded like a cheap suit with the exception of like 6 people. And I remember a couple of the people that voted against that bill, and I respected them because it was a hard vote. I mean, the riots are happening.
Right.
We're being called racist for breathing, essentially. But there was a section of that bill, Section 2 of that bill, allowed law enforcement to submit a bias crime report, bias motivated crime, that you could never expunge from your record. And they would ask you who you were, what you did for a living, what your religion was. Why law enforcement needs to know your religion, I don't know. But they would say that you were accused of a bias motivated crime under the standard of evidence, by the way, of it appears, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but it appears. And there was no way you could expunge that from your record. It was a bad bill. And the bulk of Republicans voted for it. And I say all that to say that if every Republican in a primary debate would have been asked that question, they would have been on the record and you could have held them to it. And so that's why I think primaries are important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I tell the story well. The first candidate forum I went to, and they asked if they would be in support of paper ballots. Some hands went up so quick, and I was floored. I was like, whoa, because I've been down here in the trenches with people way smarter than me watching these SEB meetings. Everybody's calling me crazy, saying, man, what are you worried about 2020? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. When I saw them hands fly up, I'm like, whoa, we are in a crossroads of change right now. So it's powerful stuff.
Can I give you a better question than do you support? The better question is, will you co-sponsor legislation? And if there is no lead sponsor, will you be the lead sponsor and drop a bill in your first term?
There you go.
And if it doesn't pass, will you continue to be a lead sponsor as you move up the ranks and get seniority? Will you continue to be a lead sponsor?
That's right. That's where
the question.
That's where the rubber meets the road right there. And that's the kind of people that we're looking for, folks. That's the kind of people. That's the kind of leadership that we want to represent us. So absolutely. All right. Great question. I agree, Christina. Christina's awesome. I'm telling you, we're going to see more Christina. So
she texts me, and I appreciate getting her text messages.
Yeah, she's on fire. I told her, I said, will you come on the show for a panel? And she's like, I'll do it with the phone. And I'm like, that's enough for me because we've got so many good people out here that we need to hear their voice. So wonderful. Let's see here. We are continuing to look for questions. My Lord. Let's see. Lot of comments here. So, Dorothy, Michelle, good to see you there tonight. Happiness Jamie, good to see you as always. Love Happiness Jamie. Christy Miner, please ask about his vote on SB 144, which gave liability shield to pesticide manufacturers. So, can you care to explain that?
Yep, didn't love that vote, but I worked with the bill sponsor to get an amendment added to that bill that essentially allowed the removal of the liability shield if the EPA, and I get confused which is federal, which is local, but if the EPA rules, I'm blanking on the
glyphosate. I guess.
Glyphosate as a carcinogen. And when the sponsor was willing to add that, I said, all right, your bill's passing anyway. I'm going to vote along with you on this one. Thank you for adding that. And that's similar to like House Bill 1013. I didn't love House Bill 1013 in its final form, but we had negotiated 7 or 8 changes. And when those 7 or 8 changes got put in, I'm like, okay, I'll give you my vote on this because you came our way some. And so that vote was a vote I didn't love. I will tell you, our farmers, though, to say that it's super important. I know there's some farmers that were opposed to it, but the guys in the caucus that I know and listen to really believed in that bill. So I said, look, I know you believe in this. Let's talk about what we can do in the future as the data continues to come out on this. And they came our way, and so that was the vote that I took on that one.
And while we're on that subject, a lot of us on the ground here are very concerned about the PFAS bill that continues to come up. I know that my state rep is lining out all kinds of documentation and theories about the EPA. I know that's their argument, but we're very weary of corporate liability shielding, and I think people think that they're trying to gaslight us to say all these corporations are going to move away, and I'm not even as hooked in with this as a lot of people in my area, because up here in Northwest Georgia, it's huge. We've got PFAS everywhere in our water. But again, there has to be a better way than just coming out and saying, "Well, we're going to shield corporations from liability." What is
Yeah, I
your
agree.
take on that bill?
Yeah,
That's
I
SB
agree.
211, I believe.
I think that's a House bill. I don't think
I'm
that's going to get
sorry,
across.
HB. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to get across the finish line. That's another. These forever chemicals are also a relevant
Yeah.
conversation for the data centers. Um,
Yes.
there's a component
Yes.
of PFAS with the data centers as well. I think that we just have to continue to kind of see. But I honestly wouldn't put a ton of energy into worrying about the whatever the House bill was that you just mentioned, because I don't see it getting out of the House. Honestly, much more getting through the Senate.
I hope not. Sorry, I turned that on. Let me get that off there. My thing is, why don't we make it pro-human? We understand we've got PFAS issues. We've got all these issues that are health concerns. Why aren't we looking at proactive ways to clean up this mess and stop it, right? As opposed to shielding corporations, or as opposed to worrying about suing everybody into oblivion. Why don't we all come together and say, hey, let's get this out of the water and let's get this out of the air for the people, That's what the focus I want to see. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the question, Christy. Christy Miner, she's awesome out of Floyd County. So we love Christy. Lisa Adams, ask him if he's ever had a conversation with Raffensperger about the 2020 election and the fact that it was stolen. My state senator Chuck Payne told us that they had closed door meetings with him, but Chuck didn't believe there was any fraud. He wouldn't tell us what they talked about. I need to know where he stands with paper. Okay, I think you answered that, but care to comment on that?
Yeah, I have had. I don't know the meeting that that Senator Payne is referencing. One of the things that frustrated me back in 2020, and the reason that we were really at odds with our leadership, was we believed that we should go into a special session. And by we, there was a small handful. Initially, it was just Brandon Beach, Burt Jones, William Ligon, and myself. And I was a freshman at the time, so they couldn't punish me. I already had all the junkie committees anyway. But they stripped Brandon and Bert and Matt
what is this?
Of their committees.
Listen, I'm trying not to interrupt you, but
no, you're good. Go ahead, bro.
What is this? You're running for lieutenant governor. What is this junk down at the White House? The Gold Dome, where if somebody doesn't like something somebody's doing, they're just going to strip them out of everything. I mean, this is crazy. It's like, what is this? This is blackmail. Well, can we stop some of that? If we disagree with people, we see it happen all the time. So and so doesn't vote for this bill. Well, we're going to strip you from this. We're going to excommunicate you. I mean, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
I agree.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. But at the time, I remember Jeff Duncan comes in the biennial meeting and he's like, I've studied this issue more than anybody and there's no fraud. And this is in like December. And so it was before with the ink was even dry on the, on the ballots, basically. And so Brad never met with, and I did not meet with Brad about the election that I can recall. And I have decent memory until we met a couple of years later, to talk about the 5.5A issue that I talked about earlier in your show. Now you can go back to the William Ligon hearings and you can see Ryan Germany and I going back and forth because I was frustrated around the absentee ballot request forms. Roy, I did not know you then, but if you go back to 2020 on my X feed, you will see that I botched my signature and requested an absentee ballot. So I signed my signature completely differently because I wanted to test the system. I wanted to see if I requested a ballot with a signature that did not match, would I get my ballot? And sure enough, in Forsyth County, I got my ballot. And Forsyth County gets most things right. I had a friend who did it in Fulton County. He had his child sign his signature. He got his ballot. Wes Cantrell did it over in Cherokee County. He botched his signature. He got his ballot. BJ Van Gundy, I forget where BJ, I think maybe Gwinnett County did it, and he got his ballot. And so the biggest initial thing that we were pushing on was our firm belief that the 1.3 million people that voted by absentee, that there was no signature check. And I still believe that to be the case. And that was the first thing that we were pushing on. We did the press conference. Leadership got frustrated. And it was downhill from there. But no, I don't remember any closed door meeting with Raffensperger right after the election.
Okay. All right. So I'm moving on down here. This is a good question. How available will you be as lieutenant governor to your constituents? And I guess I'd like to add to that. Obviously, we in reality, you can't talk to everybody. I understand that, but will you at least make a pledge that you're going to keep an open door policy to the general, whatever the general consensus is, even including grassroots, right? Will you be open door with us?
Yes, and I think that you know, I've done that in the last 7 years locally. It's a lot easier when I see people at Publix in the soccer field and, wherever I run into, basketball games with my kids or whatever. It is a different role. It's a statewide role with 11 million people. But I think that means you got to get out and get around the state.
Right.
And you can't just be seen only during election time.
Right.
And I think that, being available in formats to answer questions like this is very, very, very valuable. I'll tell you that there's some people that frankly couldn't get on and carry water for an hour and 25 minutes talking about policy.
Right.
But it's something that I enjoy doing. And so it's something that I would continue to do. And I get into the nuance of these bills. And so it's something that I enjoy kind of thinking about and talking about. I think that, obviously some people aren't wired the same way. Maybe they're a little bit more nervous doing it, and it's easier to kind of just stay in your ivory tower.
Right. Absolutely. And I think our dynamic is changing now, right? We're asking for no longer business as usual. I think finally people are realizing, because let's face it, folks, we're in a political game. We know how this works. We know cash is king, the lobbyists, but like we're now realizing that, hey, all we want is to do things right. And if we can get legislators to do things right and get the people to have the buy-in together, we can make this thing actually work and pull it out of the drudge. And I don't need the keys to somebody's yacht or a stack of money. I just want it to be right. That's it. And I can go on about my merry way.
Let me talk about the money for a second, because I think that's important too. And this is another, somebody earlier talked about somebody having the race locked up, and I don't think anybody has any race locked up.
I don't either.
Brian Kemp
I don't either.
Was a dead man walking in the polls. There's so many examples. But what I would tell you is, when the voters learn about the difference of my voting record and other people that I'm running against, if this is a race on that, I really like my chances. If this is a race on who's the best looking, who's got the best smile, and maybe who's got the warmest personality, I'm probably, may not be at the top.
Gotcha.
But leadership came to us let me get my dates right on this, in 2021. And they asked us to vote for something called leadership committees.
Yes, we know well about this.
We're going to allow the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, and each caucus to raise unlimited money. Now, that's not that big of a deal, because PACs can raise unlimited money. The money would at least have to be disclosed. So that's better than a PAC, because C4s and PACs can hide their money. This was going to have to be disclosed. It was going to allow that money to coordinate with the campaign, which a PAC and a C4 cannot do. But here's the big thing, to me, at least personally. It was going to allow all of those entities to raise money during the legislative session. So starting 2 weeks ago, Monday, when we went back into session, I can't raise money. It's why John Kennedy quit and is not in the Senate anymore, because there's an ability to go campaign full time and raise money, and it may, pay a dividend for him. We'll see what happens. And I don't begrudge John for doing that. John's actually a friend of mine, and look forward to a spirited race with him. But think about this for a second. It's day 38. This is a hypothetical scenario. And the House has passed a casino bill and is languishing in the Senate. Steve Wynn could show up in Atlanta, Georgia, take the lieutenant governor out to dinner at Bones, could put $5 million on the table. The lieutenant governor could accept that. Now, the lieutenant governor could not agree to put the bill on the floor in exchange for that. That'd be a quid pro quo, but you could receive the money. And I think the fact that Republicans passed that bill is a big, big problem. There were 3 Republicans that voted against it in the state Senate. Myself, Brandon Beach, Burt Jones. You're starting to see a theme here of the guys who were voting against some of the stuff that we were really being leaned on to push.
Man.
I then brought an amendment back on the very last day of session to amend a bill to change the piece about being able to raise money during session. And the senator who had the bill refused to bring his bill to the floor because he knew my amendment was coming. I then dropped the bill the very next session to try to change the law to pull back the piece about raising money during session. None of those efforts were successful. However, 4 years later, what those efforts illustrate is who is willing to stand up for what they believe is right. Because I don't think that anybody that voted for that bill in their heart of hearts thought, you know what, it's a really great idea that only certain members of people in this building can raise money during session.
Exactly. Man, I'm glad you brought that up because there's so many avenues we can go down. But I hope that if whoever the lieutenant governor, the governor is, I'd love to see that squashed. I mean, obviously, that's not even a federal judge ruled in one of their, that hey, they didn't break the law, but the law is unconstitutional to begin with. But you guys voted it in. It's like, what? It's so.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I will not take money into a leadership committee if I'm lieutenant governor during the legislative session.
All right, we got you on record.
That's an easy no. It's a check on yourself.
Exactly.
To just say, you know what, I'm not going to do it because I don't want the appearance of impropriety. I don't want to be tempted. I don't want people feeling like they can come in and do it. It's just take it off the table.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Okay, that's good. I'm glad that got brought up. Let's see. Let's go on down here. We got tons of comments coming in, but I'm watching the time. I'm not going to keep them forever. So let me go down here. The power of grand jury. Do you have anything to add to grand jury? A lot of us are learning about the grand juries and how powerful they are. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that the special grand jury that Fonnie Willis stood up is especially interesting because it really changes the rules of evidentiary procurement. It allows them to go out of state and compel people. And it's really what allowed her to cast the net that she cast.
Right.
I don't know if you watched my 4-hour conversation with Miss Willis or not. But that's one of the things that we really leaned on in that conversation was her use of the special purpose grand jury and the fact that it, for example, allowed her to go, drag in Mark Meadows and a number of other people that she probably would not have been able to compel otherwise. And so you'll see that recommendation come out from the Senate Special Committee on Investigations, I think pretty shortly here.
Okay. And I'm going to paraphrase this question. This is, how are you going to ensure that we have bans on foreign laws? A lot of people are worried about, we see a lot of people swearing in on the Quran. We hear a lot of these stories about Sharia law. We know, what is your take on that?
So I have an American Law for American Courts bill that I'll be dropping hopefully next week. I'm waiting on the lawyers to give it to me. I requested it weeks ago. And so I will take the bullets and carry the mantle. I just wait until I'll be called all sorts of names in the press over that one as well. But we need Georgia laws and Georgia courts.
Gotcha.
And there's a provision of Georgia law that would seem to do that now. But very similar to my attempt 7 years ago to ensure that only American citizens could vote in Georgia elections. This is an attempt to enshrine and kind of build that out and beef that up a little bit more in law. Awesome.
There's Jasper Manis. Thank you for being here with us tonight. That's a new person it's new to me that I'm seeing. Let's see, a lot of replies. Let's see here. Beth Dunn, good to see you tonight. What can we see in the way of helping foster care and helping our foster children get the services they need but are not getting due to budget cuts? So what's your comment on that?
Yeah, so we haven't cut the budget. I think that's a little bit of a fallacy that's out there right now. There is a hole that we should fill. And Candace Broach, who's the commissioner of DFACS, testified to this last week in committee. And she laid out a number of things in testimony that we'll follow up on in the subcommittee. But I would certainly look for, I've already had conversations about us filling that hole with members of the Appropriations Committee. I will tell you that we cannot be the party that says that we are pro-life without ensuring that we are taking care of those that are most in need, particularly the foster kids that are in the system. Adopting a child, the president of our company that we hired a couple of years ago, is a dear friend of mine. He just adopted a child a couple months ago. And it was tough. It's a tough process, and it's expensive. It's far more expensive than it should be to adopt a child in America. And so I think that we need to do work there. I actually, when Burt Jones was elected, I went to Burt and I said, Burt, I think that we should form a new committee on the Senate on adoption. And Burt said, let's call it the Children and Families Committee. And so he broadened it a little bit. And we now have a Senate committee dedicated to looking into these issues. They've moved the needle. The hoteling issue was a big deal a couple of years ago. We're happy to report now that there are no longer kids staying alone in hotels. And so we just need to continue working on these issues. And that Children's and Families Committee is something that they're actively working on that.
That's good news. Some of the best people I know are foster kids. So, all right, Andrew McCrae, Kyre, good to have you tonight. He says, "Where do you stand on HB 211?" I think we've already covered that. Appreciate that. Andrew's doing a lot of work on that, and we appreciate him. And let's see here. I'm going to go on down here. Christian Hurd, good to see you tonight, Christian. And he's got a comment. Good to see people moving forward. I think we're all happy that our legislature is really, really hitting the taxes in a very, I mean, great. Oh, I'm ecstatic about it. I feel like we're taxed to death, so it's a breath of fresh air. Thank you for being with us, Christian. He's also running for Congress in the 14th. Let's see here. Okay, I think we're getting down. So Jasper asked a question. If you want to talk, where do you stand on blockchain? Where do you stand on digital currency? Do you want to keep the dollar afloat? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I actually introduced a bill last year in the state Senate to allow a crypto, specifically a Bitcoin reserve in the state treasury, to allow us to hold digital assets in our state treasury. We actually have on any given day between $40 and $60 billion in the state treasury that we invest in overnight credit swaps and things like that. And we've started the conversation. The current holdup on that bill is all of our deposits need to return a yield. And obviously Bitcoin, there's no yield with Bitcoin. So we need to change the rule there. So we've started the dialogue there.
Okay.
And I absolutely am a strong supporter of blockchain technology as it relates to a hedge against fiat currency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know a little bit about blockchain. I feel like it's a little safer, but of course, any talk about digital currency is going to be scary, because who's going to be in control of it? But yeah.
So the other thing that we did, and I was the Senate sponsor of this bill a couple of years ago. We passed a bill to ban central bank digital currency.
Yes,
so it
thank
cannot
God.
be a tracking currency.
Does not need to be central bank.
So if you look at stable coin, which is tied to fiat, but is not necessarily it's not necessarily a function where you'd be tracked by it. That's an interesting tech. Trump had the bill, and I forget the name. The Genius Act was the name of that bill, where they started to kind of lay the regulatory groundwork for that. That was really interesting. I think that David Sachs and the president's team that's working on some of that stuff is really they're really doing a good job.
Right. 10-4. Jeff Spivak, good to see you. Yes, we did talk about the FBI as soon as we were done. You go back to the beginning. Big news we're going to be following for the next few days. Let's see here. All right, we're going down. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here, Greg. And thank you for being patient with us. We're at an hour and a half. So let's see here. I want to make sure we get any more questions. So Jeff, he laid out the plan. They're looking at the state income tax going down. What did you say, 2032, I believe, to year zero, and then like a flat tax. That's in the beginning. Lauren Ellsbury, I skipped over you. Good to see you tonight. Ned Yates, Sir Ned Yates, good to have you in here. Let's see. Debbie Weathersby, good to see you. Let's see. Yeah, everybody, there's some really good comments in here. We'd had to spend 3 hours, so. Sean Lopez asked, where are the Colton Kool-Aid drinkers at? Sean, I think you're in the wrong podcast. You might need to go and watch one that doesn't require as much more thinking as this one. So I don't even know who that is, or Colton Kool-Aid drinkers. That's ridiculous. Let's see. Oh, okay. He's a Colton Moore basher. So I see. Yeah. Get lost, dude. We need people with brains in here. Come on. let's see. Mike Dean Tiles, good to see you. Matt Day, good to have you. Matt Day looks like he's running for Congress. Okay, I think we're getting down to the nitty gritty. So, all right, guys. So that's it for all the questions. Greg, I do encourage you. You can go back and look through the comments. There's some really good people in there. Awesome. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. I mean, full disclosure, right? We struck up a conversation. I've asked you some tough questions. You have been very forthcoming with me. We're watching your campaign as we're watching this unfold, and of course, we have this jungle primary in the that we're dealing with up here in the 14th. I hope you guys can take a serious look at closing our primaries and getting rid of this junk of a jungle primary. I don't think it's helping any of us. So just
that's something y'all could do is rally support behind that bill of mine to go to closed primaries. Yeah, I could use some help on that one.
Well, I tell you what's the bill number, because we can add it to our focus.
I think Christy said it, but I think it's 373 if I recall correctly. But I'll need to get that to you.
Sure, you get that to me, because trust me, we're watching bills, we're watching the legislature. We want to have a proactive, pro-human relationship with all of our government representatives. And I thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. And I hope that this will attract more to come to the show, that we're not just out here barking at each other. We really, really want to have an open dialogue. And I always give my guests the last word. So, Greg, I'm going to give you the last word, sir.
Well, Roy, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I will tell you that this service is not just kind of like some glorified version of a Rotary Club or an Optimist Club, where it's the next step that you're the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and then you go into politics. It is actually that for some people, but for me, I believe we're in a fight to save Western civilization. I believe that America is ground zero for that fight, and ironically, Georgia is ground zero for the fight to save America, and that's why I'm here. And I don't have to do this. If this went away tomorrow, I've got a pretty good life back home. But I'm compelled to do it because this government of ours, this country of ours, is the greatest experiment in human governance in the history of mankind. And I had the opportunity to travel the world for 10 years with a guy named Chris Tomlin. And I was his tour manager, and I saw a lot of places. And I was telling you, my friend, there's a lot of beautiful places out there, but there's no place like home. And this America is worth protecting, worth preserving. And the founding values of this country, the founding principles of this country, should be those which we measure all of our elected officials by, their allegiance to those principles. So it's great to see you. I hope to see you guys soon. And thank you again for having me on.
Man, appreciate it. And we hope that we'll get you back, as we go into the year, and we'll check on your progression and as we all go through this together. So, guys, it's been a blast. I appreciate all the wonderful comments, questions. And again, we've got some stuff planned for this weekend and next week as we bring more information to you. Y'all shoot me some messages and things, especially if I have on Facebook, I have at the very top pinned bills that you are interested in, that you're curious about as we go through this together, and we get the best and the brightest moving forward. So. But anyway, we're out. Thanks again, Greg, for being here and hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys next week.
The legislature legalized unverifiable voting in 2000.
Like you said to Trump, but they're getting beauty.
They said, go out there and rob these houses and bring back the bounty, and then that'll pay your way.
Because Republicans who get endorsement from Georgia carry that they mean anything.
You can't sit on the sidelines any longer. You must get involved in the game. This is your sign.